Welcome everyone, and thank you for coming along today to this event, Active Transport, Developing the Tracks and Trails Strategy, part of the Sustainability Festival for the Bass Coast region. So before we begin, I'd like to again thank you for coming today, acknowledge that we've taken the time out of a busy day to come and be part of this session, and also note that these sessions will actually be recorded and available for future watching, which is fantastic. I'd also like to formally acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Bunurong people, and their leaders past, present and emerging. Now, at this point, I'd also like to hand over to Councillor David Rooks, who joins us today to lead this session. So, Councillor David, can you please let us know a little bit about active transport?
Can do. Thank you very much. Sorry for that handover, and I understand that you might disappear from the screen and go off and have some lunch.
It's possible.
Which is fine, Zoe. I know you know all about it. I know you understand active transport very well. So you can also see on screen Mary Whelan and Don Turner, and along with myself and someone who's missing, who's Peter Belf, we would be presenting today. We have been working on active transport for Phillip Island through the PITS CRG, and I'm going to explain a little bit about that more later. First, just to introduce myself, I've been a councillor for 1 year for the Island Ward Council, and during that time have got involved in tracks and trails as, I guess, a personal passion of mine. I'm just going to share the screen and just explain some of the things I'm going to talk about, so I'll just do that first. So as I say, introducing ourselves, Mary's been involved with Totally Renewable Phillip Island, who is presenting this, this presentation today. She has been involved with, I don't know, tricky for probably since its inception, which will probably be 3 years ago, Mary, I might guess there.
Yes, yeah, 3 years, yeah.
Yeah, and she's also been involved in the Phillip Island Integrated Transport Study, which we'll talk about more soon, and since its inception in 2014, and was a community member with regards to transport before that. So she brings a lot of experience to active transport. And Don Turner is someone who also has been very supportive of active transport. He's a cyclist himself. He's done a mountain of work with the school groups over the years. He's also a member of BUG. And when he talks, he might introduce a few more things that Don's done with regards to active transport. Peter Belf, who unfortunately is not here today, he's worked with Vic Roads. He gets involved with our strategy here more on behalf of the Phillip Island Conservation Society, and that's his involvement. But he has a lot of knowledge and skills to what we're doing here. So that's the three people. What is active transport and why do we need it? Is the first point I'm going to talk about. Then I'm going to look at what the Shire has done in the past 20 years or so, specifically as PITS from now on. And then also we'll look at the history of PITS, which Mary will talk to because she's been involved so long. And then what is happening now, I'll talk about that since I've been involved since November last year. And then Mary, Peter, well not Peter, but Mary and Don will talk to a few more things with regards to a tracks and trails submission that we've done on behalf of the Phillip Island Integrated Transport Study Group. So first up, what is active transport and why do we need it? I thought I'd share this picture first, which I guess explains what is active transport. Active transport would start at the top and work its way down. So unfortunately, in our community, along with many other communities around the world, the private car is the dominant one. What we'd like to see from an active transport point of view is pedestrians and cyclists getting more involved. If that can't be done, then using public transport or ride sharing, and the last option would be the private car. So that's what active transport is. And what are the benefits of active transport, or why do we want it? The next few slides I'm going to be showing are from the Institute for Sensible Transport. And there was a presentation yesterday by what's his name?
Dr. Elliot Fishman.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Elliot Fishman. who's from the Institute for Sensible Transport, and he did a presentation on electric vehicles. That was sponsored by TRPI, that presentation. He's allowed us to use some of his slides. So these are some of his slides, and they explain very well why we want to go with active transport. So transport itself is one of our biggest contributors to climate change. Unlike other sectors, unfortunately, the emissions in transport has still been growing. Dr. Elliott and his team at the Institute for Sensible Transport has been working with the Bass Coast Shire on a couple of projects. One is the Cows Activity Plan for Wonthaggi, and also the Cows Activity Plan for cows. And as such, they've done quite a bit of work and research into Bass Coast. So some of the data we've got here is fantastic because it's relevant to the Bass Coast. And most trips, and I'll show you some more data later, but most trips in Bass Coast are by car, and most trips are under 5 kilometres. With the focus on electric vehicles, those charged with renewable energy are one of the most effective ways of reducing emissions. That was more relevant to yesterday's discussion. And I like this one: reducing car use and creating more walkable and cyclable environments helps to reduce emissions, but also tackles other challenges. The benefits of jumping on your bike, especially if it's a short trip of a couple of kilometres, to ride to work or ride down to join your friends for coffee. The health benefits are fantastic, both for physical and mental. The livability, in the sense that you're out in the open, not as many cars on the road, reducing the congestion, especially here at Phillip Island, we get a lot of congestion at certain times of the year. And road safety, if we can get more active transport users on the road and reduce the number of cars as the roads become safer. So I really like the focus of that last dot point. Going into a bit more detail on, and Mary, you can jump in here if you want, but going into a bit more detail on why active transport's good for the environment. This image here you can see shows the carbon, the effect of the environment that the vehicles have on the environment. And you can see that the ones on the left there, the amount of CO2 that's released through just using a car is for each kilometre travelled is huge compared to if you go all the way to the right hand side and you look at walking, which doesn't use up any, leave any carbon footprint at all. So it's an excellent chart that shows the significant advantages to our environment by walking or using active transport.
If I just comment, David, what Elliot pointed out yesterday, if we look at the line underneath, it also refers to the space in square meters required per occupant. So if we look at the average Victorian car at the far left, and then we look at the Tesla Model S with the green power, they still take up the same amount of room, even though the Tesla with green power has no emissions, which is what we want. But Elliot's point is that that cars still take up a lot of room, and with cars comes the need for parking spaces. And so it's a consideration as well when we are looking at the amenity and the livability, particularly of towns and central areas where cars are still present in large numbers as against your bike and your pedestrian. So that's just a point he made, David.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, Mary.
Can I just interject on that point, that he also mentioned that for every car in the community, there are 4 or 5 car spaces. So some of those might be in your garage and on your street front, but school, work, wherever, they take a huge amount of space. So 45% of real estate in urban areas. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernie. Good point. Yep. So relevant to Bass Coast and specifically the Wonthaggi community. And again, Mary, you're welcome to speak to this because I wasn't there at the presentation yesterday, unfortunately, but it clearly shows that within the Wonthaggi area that the predominant transport that's used is car. And I know most of those trips are very short as well. So it's something we can try to turn around by getting more people on the cycle or walking to increase those numbers and, you know, remove some of that congestion and car parking and making our towns a lot more livable without cars taking up so much space.
I think there has been work done. They've done some figures for Phillip Island as well, and I'm not sure if they're quite as high as that, but there's certainly quite high the number of short trips and the number of trips by car. And we know that because we know, you know, we don't have the infrastructure yet for a lot of cycling, and we don't have a lot of public transport. So it's a bit confronting when you really look at it as the reality of how much we use our cars.
Yep, and I guess what this presentation is about is we see an opportunity for change, and the change is already happening from our point of view in what the work we're doing, which we're going to talk about soon. So it's exciting times. This shows the significant impact that transport has on the environment. So with regards to, again, carbon emissions, and you know, transport's the second highest one within the Bass Coast. So it's something that we can really do to help. This is from our climate action plan, probably this slide. So again, if we can get some active transport happening, we can have a significant effect on our climate within our Bass Coast area. I like these next two slides. Picture tells 1,000 words. And this one is from Amsterdam, and it's present time. And the next slide I'm going to show you, I believe, is from 1967, and I'll flick back and forth so you can see, I guess, the issues faced there with the cars dominating the street, the cyclists trying to weave in and out of the cars, and you compare that to a place which I think provides a lot more opportunities for coffee, for socialisation, and it's a lot safer for the cyclists there. And plenty of people can park their bike right up next to those trees, which I really like. I visited Amsterdam, and it's like that. And it's something that, I mean, we might not get to this point, but it's something that we could definitely look towards doing and implementing some things so we can move towards what Amsterdam has done. Mary, anything to add, or are you happy with it?
Yeah, I'll just make a comment there. I think it is actually somewhere else in the Netherlands. It's in Utrecht, and that's a city in the Netherlands as well. But yes, it was quite, Elliot's way of describing this was, if people say, oh, but we're not like Netherlands, or we're not like Denmark. Well, going back to the next slide David had, well, they weren't like that either until they made that change. It's the same street. And so it's a great example of what is possible when confronted with that sort of comment that it's not like that here.
This is just another good slide that Elliot showed yesterday, which shows the significance of car speed against pedestrians or cyclists, and how they can avoid injury or survival. So or remain or not be injured. So as you can see, as the speed increases, there's a significant more chance of being hurt significantly. So it's another reason why we want to try to just turn the focus around within Phillip Island, especially in some of those streets, the urban streets. If we can reduce the speed, and they are used by cyclists, especially if there's a cycle lane there, then it makes it a lot safer for people to cycle around and to walk around. So some of the things, so I've talked about what is active transport and why do we need it. Now I want to talk about what the Shire has done. And in the last 20 years or so, the Shire has made huge efforts to get tracks and trails underway. There are about 10 plans listed that I'm aware of. And it goes all the way back to the 2000 Bass Coast Bicycle Strategy. So these are all things that I know Don will be aware of, and he could tick the box on all these different plans that I'm looking at, that we've got a summary of in our submission. And I guess the intent was there for the Bass Coast Shire to do something, but we haven't quite nailed it, I don't think. I know the community's wanted it. I've lived here for 20 years, and the community's always been keen for tracks and trails. So the timing now is, I think it's going to happen. One of the principal strategies that was done, again, I'll mention, is the Phillip Island Integrated Transport Study, which which Mary's going to talk to soon. That came out in 2014, and she's going to give a bit of a history of that. But just to say again that there has been a lot of interest in getting tracks and trails underway, but we haven't quite got there yet. But Mary, if you just want to talk about, I guess, that 2014 report and the significance of it and where it fits, and then we'll come back to me.
So I think lots of people know it, but as it's being recorded, it's a good little snapshot. If we go back briefly to 2010, there was a group of people at Surf Beach who were very concerned about road safety, particularly at Surf Beach, but along the Phillip Island Road in general. And that included Cape Woolamai and Back Beach Road as well. It was unsafe. The road was 80 kilometres an hour and people couldn't basically turn right onto the road in peak times. The group at Surf Beach started to agitate and contact Vic Roads, and we were quite active. They knew we were there, but we hadn't made a lot of impact. But then there was a fatal accident in 2011, just started 2011 at Surf Beach. That galvanised the community. We became, we launched a large group called the Road Working Group, included San Remo. There was a local young person who developed a petition across the area. We got about 5,500 signatures. We went with this young person and other community members to see the Minister for Transport, Terry Mulder, and he agreed there was a problem. He allocated money to the Phillip Island Integrated Transport Study and also some money towards Surf Beach, a study actually at Surf Beach. After that, the study came out. Vic Roads also agreed to drop the speed limit at Surf Beach to 60k, and that has made a big difference to the amenity there. And part of the 2014 PITS strategy was the start of a community reference group. That was a recommendation in that study. And so the community reference group actually came out of a community meeting, and the people who are interested stayed involved and were supported by the Shire to be that reference group. The two things that the community reference group the two roles they were to play was, number one, to put the community priorities for action into the authorities as to what need to be done first. And the second thing was keep people informed. And we did both of that. Myself and Don were on that community reference group from very early on. Now, the PIT strategy is very strong on reducing the domination of private cars. And so it's an advocate, a strong advocate for increased cycling and walking. But that was 2014. And while that was very clear in that document, it was actually the community sentiment at the time that we needed to make the road safe before we were able to, progress with the tracks and trails. And so the community reference group was very strong in putting in that priority for making the Phillip Island Road safe. And that was with a roundabout at Woolamai, a roundabout at Back Beach Road. We also heavily promoted the need for action at Surf Beach, a roundabout there, and also at San Remo, at Back Beach Road, San Remo. So half of those projects have been completed, and they have made a big improvement in the road safety on the island. And the other two projects are being still front of mind with the regional roads and also with council. And so now's the time we can start to look at seriously concentrating on the tracks and trails now, because the community has some ease about the increased safety. And through David's work, there's also great work being done on review of the speed limits on the island. We haven't got the results yet, but we know that all this work feeds into becoming a safer, more friendly and environment for cycling and for pedestrians. And so it's a great time to be advocating for money to be now dedicated to infrastructure and to developing a really top-notch strategy, not only for Phillip Island, but the Shire's approaching it as a Shire-wide priority as well. So thanks, David. That's back to you then.
Thanks, Mary. So yeah, Mary's history there was fantastic and takes us up to about 2019-20, and I just want to then cover what's happened in the last year. I've been very fortunate to come in at a time when I guess the PITS group, the CRG group, Community Reference Group, was ready to focus on tracks and trails. And what I was able to do first is to build the capacity of the Community Reference Group to make sure we had the right people that understood active transport. And Mary came back to the group, and Don came back to the group representing TRPI and BUG, being Bicycle Users Group. And I've also, Peter Belts joined the group, representing the Phillip Island Conservation Society, and they're very skilled people in this area. We've also got the Nature Park represented again on the group, which is fantastic because they're very pro getting people access into their parks. So in their parkland spaces on the island, they've got 20% of the island. So it's great if we can work with them to have access through their parklands. We've also got the Phillip Island Business Network representing us too, because we understand the value of active transport for visitors as well. The speed review Mary mentioned, so that's come up at the start of the year, and we should hear from the Minister soon to see that that's going to get implemented. It will look at reducing some of the speeds on the roads on Phillip Island, which is a good thing for safety and for people that are using active transport and cycling on the shoulders of our roads. Previously, I believe that our tracks and trails, the budget each year would probably be around $300,000, I think, for new tracks and trails. Our long-term financial plan, which has just been signed off, has $1 million each year, so for the next 10 years. And that is a huge, I guess, supporter now of tracks and trails. It's not just the council saying we're going to have a strategy, but they've actually set aside money to build these tracks and trails. Of that 10 million over 10 years, most of it is coming from council's own funds, and some of it comes from private funding as well, or state and federal government funding, I should say. So the commitment's there's no doubt about it from a funding point of view. They've also committed a tracks and trails strategy for the Bass Coast Shire to, I guess, there's been so many different strategies. They want to try to get one overarching document, which they're trying to get. And so that's started. They have employed a consultant, which I think it's spelled XYST, and I think you pronounce it, or would that be excited? So there is a consultant that's been engaged, and we're going to be presenting to them a submission. So when I say we, that's the Phillip Island Integrated Transport Study Reference Group. We've been working for 3 or 4 weeks on what we see as active transport, where it fits, and we're going to present that to the consultant. We've also, the whole community's then got opportunities to respond also to the consultant as they look for a Shire-wide strategy on tracks and trails. And people will also get the opportunity to give feedback on our submission that we've done as a group. And on that note, I'm going to share my screen again, because I think Mary's going to talk a little bit more about the submission that we've put forward.
Pretty soon, I think I'll hand over to Don, but I don't know if you're familiar with this map, Bernie, but when we got together at the CRG recently in the last 6 months, we were all aware of the different reports, and we tried to look at well, what do we have, rather than try and reinvent it or do it again now, because of so much work's been done. And when we look closely at this PITS map, these are the solid lines are the ones that are in place, and the dotted lines are the ones that are proposed. And so we decided as a group to adopt this as our recommended recommendations for the consultant for what needs to be done on Phillip Island. Don, would you like to now talk to the sort of the thinking around the different types of pathways and on-road cycling. And
I guess I just want to put it into a bit of context, and that is that Phillip Island, well, being an island, it's surrounded by wonderful beaches, and so there's the opportunity for a huge level of enjoyment for cyclists to get around, not only to enjoy the ride, but enjoy the views as you go along. So, and therefore the opportunity for tourists is huge as well. Okay, so it's not just the residents who enjoy the benefits of cycling for intrinsic value, but also for visitors to the island as well. So basically, over time, council in particular has been mindful of the fact that off-road shared paths are a necessary thing, and so they've developed a continuous path that pretty much goes from Wonthaggi to Cowes and other parts of Phillip Island as well. So from a touring bike cyclist, yeah, you can actually go from major centres, from one major centre to another, off-road or on-road. Okay, so part of what we're looking at is there are some roads that have got a decent shoulder on them, which means that the cyclists can cycle out away from the actual motor vehicle lane on the left-hand side of a white line. Okay, so in particular, it's the three main Vic Roads roads. There's the Phillip Island Tourist Road, Back Beach Road, and Ventnor Road that are all Vic Roads or Department of Transport roads, and they've basically got a decent shoulder. Some of those shoulders can still be improved. For example, Ventnor Road has a shoulder, but there's a large unsealed section to the left-hand side of the solid line. And if that was sealed, then it would improve that tremendously. So what we're suggesting is if those sealed shoulders could be maintained and indeed turned into dedicated cycling lanes, which means that they would have to be signed as such, that would improve the safety of cyclists no end. In fact, just today, I fielded an email from a Melbourne suburban cyclist who said she was interested in coming down and riding with the Phillip Island Bicycle User Group, but she was concerned that most of our rides are on-road and she feels uncomfortable about that. Well, my reply was that some of our roads are using the off-road trails, and in particular the rail trail, for example. But on the other hand, if the shoulders were all put up to a decent standard and signposted as dedicated cycling lanes, then the likes of this person would feel much safer to ride them. Okay, so areas improvement, that's one thing to improve the shoulders. Another thing is to sweep the roads more often. So that's a message to Department of Transport and to Council that it's an automatic thing that motor vehicles in the motor vehicle lane, they tend to push the debris to the side of the road and onto the shoulder, which is where the cyclists ride. So it makes it less safe and less comfortable to have tree branches and loose stones on the sides of the road. So that's an area for improvement. Another thing that we've talked about with the tracks and trails strategy is end of ride facilities, such as more toilet blocks and drink stations, so that when riders get to a destination, typically a beach, whatever, then the trip will be enhanced by having better facilities at the end of the ride. We know that these issues will be addressed over time, and so yeah, we're looking forward to gradual improvements. One of the things that I talk about with groups is that we can't expect revolution necessarily, but evolution is what we are aiming for. So gradual improvements over time, and to, I guess, celebrate those and make sure that we're using those facilities. One of our big prime movers for the Tracks and Trails strategy has been safety around schools. Now, Council, through the Community Road Safety Committee, has successfully applied for funding from what was Vic Roads some years ago now, to create or to examine and create maps for some of the schools, not all of them, in the Shire, to highlight what would be the safest routes for kids to travel to school, either by cycling or walking, and that was with an aim to improve the uptake of cycling. Those were successful up to a point, but now it's been pointed out that not only has there not been an evaluation of that process, which is necessary, but also there have been changes. For example, there are 2 new schools on Phillip Island and one being built at San Remo at the moment. There are new housing estates where kids are living now and therefore commuting to school. So there are population changes, and yeah, so those things need to be taken into account, and that process of safe routes to schools needs to be revisited. And as it's been pointed out already, some of the benefits of that are congestion around schools in particular, and obviously congestion lessens their safety, but also the health benefits of kids being able to walk and cycle to school are huge, and the social benefits of being able to do that with your mates rather than being stuck behind the glass windows of a car. They're all really important things. So the more that we can improve that, the better. And to its credit, Council has been concentrating on putting some of the links or linking up the gaps in pathways. For example, along Settlement Road from down near the golf course up towards Cowes Primary School. So that's an area that we'll be visiting through the Tracks and Trails strategy, and giving it high priority to improve safety around schools by improving the tracks and trails that lead to the schools. Well, that's about it for me, I think, David.
Thanks, Don. Fantastic coverage. Mary, did you want to talk to the map at all as well?
Probably just a little bit, just to say that the challenge. So Don's talked a lot about the on-road, on the main roads, on the big road cycling, because they've got a decent shoulder, and how good that's going to, how much more cycling that's going to be available for people once we've got all those recommendations there put in place. But I guess the new thing that will be a great change as well will be within the town boundaries, the change to on-road cycling. And they're the dotted blue lines through Cowes, Ventnor, Rill, San Remo. And so they will, and to achieve that, if we think back to that that vision in Utrecht, it's not quite as closed as that, but it's more about reducing the speed limit, having an on-road cycle lane, and making those roads very safe for average people to ride, because the speed limit's reduced and the visibility, the change to where people are able to park on the road, all those things are taken into account. So it will be quite I know what Don's saying about a revolution, not a revolution, but once we start to address those main roads with some on-road cycling and make those changes necessary, I think that will really make a big difference to achieving this notion of, in the Victorian government, state government bicycle strategy, it talks about the 20-minute trips, the trips within your neighbourhood, you know, trips from your home to the shop, to the library, to the, you know, those ones that it's more bother to get in your car and go, but if it's not safe, you won't get on your bike and take that trip. So I think that's the real challenge for us, and that'll be something new for a lot of people to, that'll be a new experience for people to consider. But I think if we can promote the benefits of that, and the fact that there are associated changes, will increase the livability and the amenity of all those streets. But it, you know, people still drive their cars, but it'll be just at a slower speed, and cyclists will have a place, as against just being feeling like they're in the way, or, you know, they don't quite fit because you know, there's no real provision for them. So that would be my only comment. I guess the only other thing that Peter Belf would have talked about if he was here was, if we have a look at the green markings all around the island there, the recreational trails. Peter's comments to the consultants will be about the fact that we are going to need to make provision in the future for maybe some land acquisition or some reservation of land to be able to achieve those recreational trails, you know, into the future. So he's, you know, part of the Conservation Society, but and also sees that these are great. These will be great amenities for people, and we need to provision now for the future, so those pathways can be constructed. You know, when we've done a lot of the everyday improvements and the safe cycling to school and all that, when we've got all those things ticked off, we can look at expanding the recreational trails. So
just on that, if I can add, David's already mentioned about the importance of the Phillip Island nature parks. Some of those green lines are on nature park land, and yeah, they've been quite active in planning for some extra routes there, and I guess this whole process needs to acknowledge nature parks and be encouraging them as well to work with council to make sure that more of those are joined up and joined with council work as well.
Yep, very true.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Don. I'll move to the next slide, and I might talk to it first, and then if Mary and Don want to add something, they can. But I think this shows the size of the project that has been undertaken. It shows the different categories, and Don's already talked about primary school children and secondary school children. And then we've got recreational riders, commuters and utilities are people that tend to, that's the one that I think we can really get some benefit from with what Mary's just spoken about, having pathways on road or off road that are local. So you can jump on your bike to go get a coffee, or jump on your bike to go to a meeting, or jump on the bike to go to the beach, those sort of things. And that's the commuter and utility people. Then there's the ones who are touring, that do long distances, and the sporting ones that like to ride on the road and like to not necessarily be on the shoulder, but actually on the road. And Phillip Island has all of those. So it makes our project massive. And there's characteristics of each type of rider. And then there's actually the riding environment, which you have to take into account. So as I said, some of them like riding on the actual road, which is the bottom group, the sporting. And the complete opposite of that is the primary school kids that tend to like to ride on the footpaths or off-road paths, or if it's a really quiet street, they'll ride on that. And so there's a big difference of what sort of tracks and people want and need. And there's also some that would prefer, especially the tourists and the recreational riders, that would prefer some of the tracks to be gravel as opposed to concrete, so they can enjoy that experience more. So it's a very complex task. This we've taken from this table we've got here, we've taken from work that the government's done on Offroad's design back in 2011, but it's still very relevant to us. It's in the PITS document, and we're using it as part of our submission towards the Bass Coast Tracks and Trails strategy. And the next one, I think, does the same thing, but from a walking point of view. There are different types of walkers, and they're graded. This shows some of those variations that you require. Did you want to talk to this one, Mary, because it's yours?
Yes, I will. So we'll talk to that a little bit. So, and it leads into one of our other priorities that we've identified, and that is to formalise pathways for, we call it family-friendly or disability access, and our goal is to have in all the key locations around Phillip Island, that we have a pathway or a set of pathways that are able to be used by people easily, either with prams, with wheelchairs, with reduced mobility. And if we just go back to the slide before, David, I pulled out this slide from, this is from the Australian Guide for Walking Tracks, which gives you a grade of pathway. And so there's a standard that we will be looking for our pathways to be graded, so people know what type of capacity you need, or what level of difficulty they'll find on that. And if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about the fact that David, myself and Mike met with Marie Grover, and we know Marie, who is part of the CRG, and her daughter, this is her daughter, Olivia, who is a disabled person. She's an adult, and she uses a wheelchair for when she's out and about. She is able to walk, but for any distance she uses a wheelchair. So we met with Livy and Marie, and also Livy's carers, and we went on a walk around Cowes. And our goal is to have a path between Muscle Rocks, and if we go Muscle Rocks along the Esplanade there, down onto the pathway, down towards the rock wall, along the rock wall path, and then back up the back to Erowin Point. And we'd like that path then to extend all the way down to Rose Avenue. And the pathway there'll be a new path past the existing path once they build the rock wall. And but in this example here, this is just at Muscle Rocks looking towards the jetty. So we'd like to be able to make these areas more friendly, more user-friendly, more easy access for people in wheelchairs and their carers. And so there's not a lot that needs to be done. Like, for example, here, this is Muscle Rocks, the car park to the left of that screen. And what we'd like to see is coming off the footpath opposite Mad Cows, but on the north side, just have a new path in front of the car park, so it goes down towards these seating areas. So again, we don't want a pathway to end in a car park. We want it to end in a better path, another path to where people can sit. So the next one, David. This is an example. This is opposite that Muscle Rocks area in Cowes, and you see the degree of difficulty of people in wheelchairs. It's quite a high rise from the roadway up to the footpath, and so that's a real impediment for people either navigating it themselves, but certainly pushing someone in a wheelchair. And you can see the vehicles also sort of bottom out on that gradient. So these are the sort of things that just make it hard for people to get around, which can be fixed and changed. Next one. So there is a lot of work, there is a lot of information already about mobility, and this map I picked up from the Disability Action Plan of the Shire, which has got a new action plan 21 to 25. And it shows the degree, the gradient. Basically, the yellow coloured ones are what we consider DDA compliant. That is 1 to 20 is a gradient which is considered all abilities. The red one is 1 to 14, which is harder. And but if we go back to the one along the esplanade there, so we can see Muscle Rocks at that on the bend there, and we consider that we could, with not too much change, we could make that pathway all along there, right, improving some spots there till we get to Error Point, and then with it down, there's a huge big slope down to Lovers Walk to continue, but we've asked council to consider just reducing that slope. So, and then you get a lovely flat surface all the way down to Dunsmore Road. So this is an example of what we'd like to see in all the key locations: an easy access, disability friendly walking path. So that's an example, and it's one of our priorities in our submission to the to the consultant. So thanks, David.
Thank you, Mary. That basically sums up where we're at the moment. So I think the key messages to take that I can think of is that it's a fantastic project, the Tracks and Trails and the active transport, that the time is happening now where things are going on. And if you want to get involved or you want to provide feedback, now's the time to do it. You can do that directly to our group, of any of our group members from the community reference group, the BITS group, or you'll also be able to do it through the consultant directly when the consultant starts coming out to the community and seeking their feedback on what they want to see with Tracks and Trails. The strategy is meant to be developed for the Bass Coast Shire Tracks and Trails by about April next year, and then hopefully we can start implementing some of these much needed tracks and trails across our shire in next year's budget. That's the plan. So it is happening, and it's a big project, and we're excited to be part of it. And let's see how we can go.
Thank you, David. Bernie had a couple of questions there. Do you want to just ask them, Bernie, and we'll see if we can answer them, and then we'll wrap up the session.
Okay, sure. So I'll have to find out what they were. So,
well, your first one was about using public transport and bus. Yes, so much reduced emissions with mass transport. All
right. So on that thing from the council climate crisis action plan thing, with that pie chart thing, it had, well, predominantly cars and then buses and then bikes and pedestrians and whatever, but there was no proportion of bus travel at all in it. So why not?
Don't know that.
All right.
But we do know that there's still the majority of emissions are still by private car use. There is a statistic about bus travel, but I don't have it in front of me. But it is, I believe it is in the climate action plan.
All right. And then this other one is the category missing from the from cyclists is seniors, most of whom ride footpaths, disregarding illegal and roads too dangerous, especially Thompson Avenue. So I've been carrying on about that for quite a while, obviously. And yeah, with angle parking both sides, the athletic guys in Lycra that are hanging out in a bunch, yeah, it's fine for them. They will ride the roads, but the rest of us don't. And so, especially if that's illegal, have you got any plans to resolve that problem?
I think David can talk to that because
Bernie, our group's very aware, and Mary's been aware of this problem for a long time, the dangers of Thompson Avenue, as is Don Turner. As part of the COWS Activity Centre plan that is being undertaken at the moment, they're looking at two different options of getting rid of that issue, which is the cycling lane being where the cars pull out. I have seen it as a councillor, and it's going to be presented to all councillors soon, and then it's going to go out to the community, those options. So something is going to be done about it in the near future, Bernie.
Okay, and what about the speed limit thing? So how do you guys feel that the whole of Cowes is still 60, except for the very last bit? And with Elliot Fishman's slides that you showed just before, you've only got a 2 out of 10 chance of surviving a fatality with cows traveling at 50 k's. And so in the middle of Cowes, we're not talking about 50 k's, we're talking about 60 k's. And so what are the odds of getting that knocked on the head?
I think that Thompson Avenue is going to be reviewed as part of the Cows Activity Centre plan, so that's a good start. And if you look back to that map that Mary spoke to with regards to the dotted blue lines you see amongst Cowes and some of the other townships, I think we would advocate for, if you're going to set up some bicycle lanes that are on road, that it would be sensible to drop the speed on those roads as well, to work into the fact that this is a cycling priority road. So that's what we would be advocating for.
All right, and if you want to get kids on board, I just happen to live up behind Bamfield, and I'm walking my dog every morning, and I'm coming back from the beach. Generally, as kiddies are going to school, and when they do have bike ride days, I gave up in the end. I used to ask the mums, hey, this is great, why don't you do it more often? And they just turn around and say, no way in the world, too bloody dangerous. Yeah. So it's impossible. So kids are the ones that you want to get on board. Old farts like me don't really matter, but kids really do. And yeah, you got to have it. Got to be done.
Yeah, we hear you. And Don's done a lot of background work and a lot of years of experience of that, and so he's fully aware of what they need. And so yeah, we're aware of that, Bernie. It's part of our submissions, no doubt about it.
All right. Well, I think I just, on behalf of TRPI, I'd just like to thanks for attending, Bernie. We really appreciate your interest. And thank you, David. Thank you, Don. And I'll pass it back to Zoe to wrap it up, and we'll thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Just like to say thanks again for your time today, and such great stuff happening that often happens in the sidelines and isn't out there front and centre for community. So I think TRPI was particularly excited to bring this message out to community so that concerns such as what Bernie's been talking about, we can all be aware, and very excited to know that there is great change coming that will benefit everyone and make our roads and riding much safer. So thank you all for your time. It is much appreciated. And we look forward to seeing you at some of our other events coming up.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everybody.